Brennan McCready bought 50 acres of Montana wilderness with the last money he had not to build anything but to disappear. He wasn't running from the law. He wasn't hiding from debt. He was running from the kind of memories that don't fade with time, the kind that wake you at 3 in the morning with your heart hammering and your hands shaking. But when Dutch, his 7-year-old Belgian Malinois, stopped cold in front of a rusted railcar buried deep in the pines, a railcar that had no business being 40 miles from the nearest track, the truth that had been sleeping under that land for 40 years started breathing again. And this time, silence wasn't going to be an option. The road into Ashwood Ridge curled through the Bitterroot Mountains like a scar that never quite healed. Brennan McCready drove his '98 Ford pickup along the crumbling asphalt, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the worn armrest where the vinyl had split years ago. The truck coughed as it climbed. The engine had seen better days. So had McCready. He was 43, though his eyes looked older. Gray-blue, the color of winter sky before snow. His hair was dark but going silver at the temples, cut military short on the sides, with just enough length on top to remind him he wasn't enlisted anymore. A short beard covered his jaw, more salt than pepper now. He wore what he always wore, an olive field jacket with patches of wear at the elbows, a red and navy flannel shirt underneath cargo pants, the color of old moss, and brown leather boots that had walked through more sand than dirt. On his left wrist, a military-issue watch ticked quietly. The crystal was scratched. The band was faded. But it kept time. Dutch sat in the passenger seat, upright and alert. The Belgian Malinois didn't slouch, didn't fidget. His black and tan coat gleamed in the late afternoon light, ears standing tall as radar dishes scanning every shadow that passed the window. He wore a tactical harness, not a collar. The kind with a handle on the back. The kind that said this wasn't a pet. This was a partner. Dutch's dark eyes tracked the tree line as they drove. Every flash of movement, every shift in the wind. He didn't bark, didn't whine, just watched, processed, calculated. That was how he'd been trained. That was how he'd stayed alive. So had McCready. The road straightened, the pines opened up, and there, nestled in the valley below, was Ashwood Ridge. It wasn't much, maybe 200 people if you counted generous. A single main street with a hardware store, a post office, a gas station that still had pumps from the '90s, and a diner with a hand-painted sign that read Red Pine Diner in faded red letters. No traffic lights, no chain stores, no noise, just quiet. McCready liked quiet. He pulled into the gravel lot beside the diner. The truck settled with a groan. He killed the engine. For a moment, neither he nor Dutch moved. Then McCready spoke. His voice was low-textured like gravel underfoot. Stay close. Dutch's ears flicked forward. One sharp movement. Acknowledgement. McCready stepped out. His boots crunched on the gravel. The air was thin and cold, carrying the scent of pine and distant snow. June in Montana still had teeth. Dutch jumped down beside him, landing soft despite his 70 pounds. He moved like water, efficient, no wasted motion. They walked toward the diner together. Dutch slightly ahead, scanning, always scanning. Inside the diner was warm and smelled like coffee and old grease. A dozen people sat scattered across red vinyl booths, farmers in flannel, a couple of retirees nursing mugs of black coffee, a young woman with a sleeping baby in a carrier. Conversation didn't stop when McCready walked in, but it slowed. Eyes followed him, not hostile, just aware. Strangers were rare in Ashwood Ridge. McCready took a stool at the counter. Dutch sat beside him, not at his feet, but next to him. Eye level, equal. A woman in her late 60s appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She had white hair pulled back in a loose bun, sharp blue eyes, and the kind of face that had weathered decades without bitterness. Irish stock, probably, strong cheekbones, smile lines around her mouth. She looked at McCready, then at Dutch, then back at McCready. Coffee, she asked. Please, she poured. The mug was heavy ceramic chipped at the rim. The coffee was black and strong. You just passing through, she asked. Bought land, North Ridge. Her hand paused mid-pour on a second cup for another customer. She looked at him differently now. The Brennan property, if that's what it was called. She set the pot down, leaned against the counter, her voice softened. That land's been empty 40 years. You know why? I know it was cheap. A faint smile. Cheap's got reasons. McCready sipped his coffee, said nothing. The woman extended her hand. Margaret Dalton, Maggie, I own this place. He shook it. Her grip was firm. Brennan McCready. Her eyebrows lifted. Brennan, like the family. Coincidence? Maybe. She didn't sound convinced. You planning to build up there? Just planning to be left alone. Maggie studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough. You hungry? What's good? Sausage and eggs, hash browns, toast. That'll work. She turned toward the kitchen, then paused. Your dog eats. Not here. Dutch's eyes flicked toward the kitchen. His nose twitched. He could smell the sausage cooking. Processed meat, fillers, preservatives. He turned his head away, slowly, deliberately. A man in a booth nearby chuckled. Dogs got standards. Maggie grinned. Smarter than most men I know. Comedic moment number 1, 7:00. Oh, when the plate arrived, McCready ate in silence. Dutch sat perfectly still beside him, eyes forward, posture locked. But when Maggie set down a second plate just to be kind with a single sausage link on it, Dutch's reaction was immediate. He leaned forward, sniffed once, twice, then turned his head to the side ears, flat eyes half closed. The judgment was clear. Not good enough for you, huh? Maggie said, hands on her hips. Dutch didn't even look at her. Just stared at the wall like the sausage had personally offended him. The man in the booth laughed again. That's the most disrespect I've ever seen from a dog. McCready's mouth twitched, almost a smile. He's picky. Picky, Maggie repeated, shaking her head. That's one word for it. But she was smiling too. Transition to property, 800. After breakfast, McCready paid in cash. Left a 20% tip. Maggie watched him go. You take care up there, she called after him. He didn't answer, just lifted a hand. Acknowledgement. Dutch trotted beside him to the truck. They climbed in, the engine coughed to life. The drive north took another 30 minutes. Paved road turned to gravel. Gravel turned to dirt. Dirt turned to something that barely qualified as a trail. The trees closed in, thick pines, their trunks dark and rough, their branches interlocking overhead. The light turned green and gold filtered through needles. Finally, the trail ended. McCready stopped the truck, cut the engine. Silence rushed in. He sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, staring through the windshield at the land he'd bought for $23,000. His last $23,000. 50 acres of wilderness. No house, no well, no power lines, just trees. And quiet. And ghosts he hoped to leave behind. Dutch shifted in his seat. A low rumble vibrated in his chest. Not a growl. Not quite. Just awareness. McCready looked at him. What is it? Dutch's ears rotated forward, eyes locked on the tree line to the east. McCready followed his gaze. Saw nothing. But Dutch didn't relax. All right, McCready muttered. Let's take a look. Act 1 be the discovery. 800 to 2000. They moved through the forest together. McCready in front, Dutch ranging beside him, nose working the air. The ground was soft with decades of pine needles. The air smelled clean, cold, alive. McCready found a clearing near the center of the property. Flat ground, good drainage, sheltered by trees on 3 sides. He unloaded his gear from the truck bed. A canvas tent, a Coleman stove, a cooler, a duffel bag with clothes and a sleeping bag, a rifle case. Not much, but it was all he needed. He started setting up the tent. The poles slid together with the muscle memory of 1,000 field camps. Iraq, Afghanistan, training rotations in North Carolina. But his hands shook. Just a little. He paused, breathed, focused. Dutch sat nearby watching. When the tent was up, McCready stepped back. It leaned slightly to the left. The rainfly sagged. He frowned. Dutch tilted his head, slowly. The kind of head tilt that said, really? McCready looked at the dog. Yeah, I know. Dutch's ears flicked, his version of a shrug. Comedic moment number 2, 1200. McCready spent the next 20 minutes adjusting stakes and tightening guy lines. Dutch watched the entire time with what could only be described as professional disappointment. When McCready finally finished, the tent stood mostly straight. Mostly. He wiped his hands on his pants. Good enough. Dutch stood, walked a slow circle around the tent, sniffed the corners, sat down facing it, then looked at McCready. The message was clear. This is substandard. McCready almost smiled. Almost. You want to do better, be my guest. Dutch yawned, a long, deliberate yawn that showed every tooth. Even in the wilderness, the dog had standards. The rail car, 1500. After camp was set, McCready decided to walk the property line, get a sense of the land, see what he'd actually bought. He grabbed a canteen, clipped a compass to his belt. Dutch fell into step beside him. They walked east, following a deer trail that wound through the pines. The forest was dense here, old growth, trees thick as truck tires, roots gnarling across the path. The light was fading, gold turning to amber, shadows stretching long. And then Dutch stopped. Not a gradual stop, not a pause, a full halt. Mid-step, ears locked forward, body rigid. McCready stopped too. "What have you got?" Dutch didn't move, didn't look back, just stared ahead into the trees. McCready followed his line of sight, saw nothing at first, just more pines, more shadows. Then he saw it, a shape, geometric. Wrong. He moved closer, slowly. The trees parted, and there it was. A rail car, old, rusted, half buried in moss and pine needles. The kind of freight you'd see on a cargo train, 40 feet long, steel-sided with a sliding door that hung crooked on broken tracks. But there were no train tracks here. No rails, no ties. No cleared right-of-way, just a rail car, sitting in the middle of the forest, 40 miles from the nearest active line. McCready stopped 10 feet away, stared. Dutch sat, waiting. "How the hell did this get here?" McCready whispered. The forest didn't answer. He approached slowly. The railcar's sides were streaked with rust. The paint, once red, maybe had flaked away in patches. Vines crawled up the wheels. Moss covered the roof. It had been here a long time. McCready circled it, looking for markings, serial numbers, anything. On the far side near the door he found stenciled letters, faded, barely legible. Clearwater Industries, 1979. He pulled the door. It screeched, rust flaking, metal groaning. Then it slid open. Darkness spilled out. Old air, stale, cold. McCready pulled a flashlight from his belt, clicked it on. The beam cut through the dark and revealed a space that didn't belong in a forgotten rail car in the middle of nowhere. Inside the rail car, 1800. It wasn't empty. The interior had been converted. A workstation sat against the far wall, a desk, a chair, filing cabinets. Equipment McCready recognized: environmental testing gear. Water quality monitors, pH meters, sample bottles lined up in plastic racks. Maps covered one wall. Topographic, hand-annotated. Red circles marked areas labeled contamination zone. McCready stepped inside. Dutch followed nose low, reading the scents. The air smelled like rust and old paper and something chemical. Faint, decades old, but still there. On the desk, a stack of folders sat under a layer of dust. McCready opened the top one. Project Clearwater, Confidential Environmental Impact Assessment, Copper Mine Expansion, 1979 to 1983. He flipped through. Technical reports, water samples, cadmium levels, lead concentrations, all dangerously high. Another folder, photographs, Polaroids, curling at the edges. One showed a young man, mid-20s, flannel shirt, work boots, standing beside a drainage pipe that emptied into a creek. He wore an ID badge on a lanyard. Garrett Brennan, environmental inspector. McCready stared at the name. Brennan, same as his, same as the property. Coincidence, he'd told Maggie, but now he wasn't sure. He set the photo down, kept searching. In the bottom drawer of the desk, he found a letter, handwritten. The ink faded but still legible. He read it slowly. The letter, 1930. "If anyone finds this, I need you to know I didn't kill myself. They'll say I did. They'll say I was stressed, paranoid, that the job got to me. But I'm not crazy. The water is poisoned. The company knows. They've known for years. I took samples. I documented everything. I was going to send it to the EPA, to the newspapers, to anyone who would listen, but they found out. Sheriff Jennings came to my house last night, told me to stop, told me I was causing problems, told me people would get hurt if I kept pushing. I know what that means. If you're reading this, it means they got me. It means I didn't make it. But the evidence is here, in this rail car, in these files. The water is still poisoned. The kids are still drinking it. Please, do what I couldn't. Tell the truth." Garrett Brennan, September 12, 1983. McCready read it twice, then folded it carefully, slid it into his jacket pocket. He looked around the rail car, at the maps, the samples, the files. This wasn't just a forgotten workspace. This was a tomb for a man who'd tried to do the right thing and died for it. Dutch nudged his hand, gentle, grounding. McCready exhaled. "Yeah, I see it." He gathered the most important files, the photos, the letter, stuffed them into a canvas bag he'd brought. Then he stepped out of the rail car, back into the fading light. The forest felt different now, heavier, like it was holding its breath. Return to camp. 2000 back at camp, McCready sat by the fire he'd built. Small, controlled, just enough for warmth. Dutch lay beside him, head on his paws, eyes reflecting the firelight. McCready stared into the flames. The letter weighed heavy in his pocket. Garrett Brennan, 23 years old, trying to save people, and they killed him for it. McCready knew that story. He'd seen it before. Good men doing the right thing, getting crushed by people with power and money. He'd seen it overseas. In villages where warlords ruled and justice was a bullet. In cities where contractors lied and soldiers died. And he'd seen it here. At home. The fire crackled. Sparks drifted upward. McCready pulled the letter out. Read it again by firelight. Do what I couldn't. Tell the truth. He looked at Dutch. The dog's eyes met his. Steady, unwavering. We came here to disappear, McCready said quietly. Dutch didn't respond, just watched. Could still do that. Burn these files, walk away, pretend we never found it. The fire popped. A log split. Embers spilled. McCready folded the letter, put it back in his pocket. But you already know we won't. Dutch's tail thumped once, soft against the dirt. Agreement. McCready stared into the fire a moment longer. Then he stood. Tomorrow he'd go back to town, talk to Maggie, find out what she knew about Garrett Brennan, about the mine, about 1983. Tomorrow he'd start asking questions, because a man had died trying to tell the truth. And McCready wasn't going to let that silence last another 40 years. The fire burned low, the stars came out, and somewhere in the forest the railcar waited, still holding its secrets, still waiting for someone to listen. Morning came cold and clear. McCready woke to the sound of Dutch's low rumble, a warning that something had moved in the trees. Just a deer. But the dog didn't take chances. Neither did McCready. He made coffee on the camp stove. Instant. Black. The kind that tasted like burnt dirt but had enough caffeine to wake the dead. Dutch got kibble from a sealed container. High protein. No fillers. The dog ate methodically, efficiently, like he did everything else. By 7, they were on the road back to Ashwood Ridge. The town looked different in morning light. Less lonely, more tired. The Red Pine Diner already had trucks parked outside farmers finishing breakfast before heading to fields that would demand 12 hours of their lives. McCready parked. Dutch jumped down. They walked in together. Maggie was behind the counter pouring coffee for a man in a John Deere cap. She looked up when the door chimed, smiled, but her eyes were sharper today, like she'd been expecting him. Back already, she said. Got questions. Figured you might. She topped off the farmer's mug, then gestured toward a booth in the back. Give me 5 minutes. McCready took the booth. Dutch sat beside him, not under the table but on the bench, eye level, watching the room. True to her word, Maggie appeared 5 minutes later with 2 mugs of coffee and a plate of toast. She slid into the booth across from him. You found something up there, she said. Not a question. Rail car, middle of the forest, no tracks anywhere near it. Her face didn't change, but her hands tightened around her mug. I know the one, she said quietly. You know how it got there. Hauled in pieces. 1979. Clearwater Industries used it as a field office when they expanded the copper mine north of here. She paused. Garrett Brennan worked out of that car for 4 years. McCready pulled the photo from his jacket, set it on the table. The young man in the flannel shirt. The ID badge. Maggie's breath caught. She picked up the photo, her thumb traced the edge. He was a good kid, she said. Smart, cared about things, the environment, people. He wasn't just doing a job, he meant it. What happened to him? Maggie set the photo down, looked out the window. Her voice went flat, reciting facts to keep emotion at bay. September 1983. They found him in the woods. Single gunshot. Sheriff Wade Jennings ruled it suicide. Said Garrett was under stress. Said the mouth had gotten to him. You believe that? No. The word came hard. Final. Garrett wasn't suicidal, he was angry. He'd found something, kept talking about contaminated water, about cadmium levels, about how the company was lying. He reported, went to Sheriff Jennings first. Wade told him to drop it, said he was overreacting, causing problems. She met McCready's eyes. 2 weeks later, Garrett was dead. McCready absorbed that. Sheriff Jennings still alive. Died in 98, heart attack. Maggie's mouth twisted. His son Tucker is sheriff now. Apple didn't fall far. Dutch's ears flicked toward the door. A moment later it opened. A man in his late 40s walked in. Tall, fit, wearing a tan uniform with a star pinned to his chest. Sheriff Tucker Jennings. He scanned the diner. His eyes landed on McCready. Held there, then he walked over. "Morning, Maggie," he said. His voice was smooth, friendly, but his eyes weren't on him. "Tucker." Jennings looked at McCready, extended hand. "Tucker Jennings, Sheriff, you must be the fellow who bought the Brennan property." McCready shook his hand. The grip was firm, competitive. "Brennan McCready." Jennings' eyebrows lifted. "Brennan, funny coincidence." "So I've heard. You settling in all right up there?" "Fine. Good, good." Jennings glanced at Dutch. The dog stared back, unblinking. "That's a fine animal. Working dog?" "Was." "Military? Oh, yeah." Jennings nodded. "Thank you for your service." The words were automatic, hollow. "You planning to stay long?" "Depends." On, McCready met his eyes. How quiet it stays. Something shifted in Jennings' expression, a tightening around the mouth. "Well, Ashwood Ridge is a quiet town. We like it that way. Don't get much trouble here." "Good to know." Jennings smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "You need anything, you let me know. We take care of our people here." He tipped his hat to Maggie, walked out. The door chimed. Silence settled. Maggie exhaled. "He knows." "Knows what?" "That you found the rail car, that you are asking questions." She leaned forward. "Be careful. The Jennings family has protected Clearwater Industries for 40 years. They won't stop now." McCready finished his coffee. "Where can I find records, old newspapers, environmental reports?" "Library, 3 blocks east. Eleanor runs it." Maggie paused. She knew Garrett too. The library, 2800. The Ashwood Ridge Public Library was a small brick building with a green awning and flower boxes that hadn't been planted yet. Inside it smelled like old paper and lemon polish. A woman sat behind the circulation desk, late 60s, white hair in a neat bun, reading glasses on a chain. She looked up when McCready entered. "Help you, Bem." "Looking for newspaper archives, 1983. Her eyes sharpened. "Anything specific?" "Garrett Brennan." She studied him for a long moment, then stood. "Follow me." She led him to a back room lined with filing cabinets and microfiche readers that looked older than McCready. She pulled open a drawer, rifled through files. "September 1983, she said, handing him a folder. "You'll want to start there." McCready took it. "You knew him." "Everyone knew Garrett." Her voice was soft, sad. "He was my nephew." McCready looked at her, really looked. Same cheekbones, same eyes, family. "Eleanor Brennan," she said. "I kept my maiden name when I married. Kept it after I buried my husband, too." "I'm sorry about Garrett." She nodded, didn't trust herself to speak. McCready opened the folder, found the newspaper clipping. "Local environmental inspector found dead Garrett Brennan. 23 ruled suicide." The article was short, clinical. It gave the facts and nothing else. "Body found in the woods. Single gunshot wound. Sheriff's Department concluded self-inflicted." But there was a photo. Crime scene, black and white, grainy, Garrett's body lying face down in the dirt. And 20 feet away, clearly visible in the frame, a revolver. 20 feet. McCready had seen enough gunshot suicides to know. The weapon doesn't land 20 feet from the body. It lands inches away. In the hand. Near the head. Not 20 feet. This wasn't suicide. This was execution. "They moved the gun," McCready said quietly. Eleanor's eyes filled. "I know. I told Wade Jennings that. He said I was grief-stricken, seeing things that weren't there." "What was Garrett working on right before he died?" Eleanor pulled out another file, thicker. She opened it on the table. Inside were photocopies, water sample reports, dated August 1983. Garrett's handwriting in the margins. Cadmium 2.4 parts per million, EPA limit 0.005 parts per million, lead 0. 8 parts per million, P, a limit 0.015 parts per million. Arsenic 0.15 parts per million. P, a limit 0.01 parts per million. Every sample was over 400% above safe limits. "He tested the creek that runs through town," Eleanor said. "The one that feeds our wells, our drinking water." She pointed to a map in the file. The contamination was coming from minor runoff. Clearwater was dumping waste into the watershed. He reported it. He tried, went to the sheriff, went to the county health department. Everyone told him the same thing. "Drop it. Don't cause trouble." Her voice broke. 2 weeks later, my nephew was dead. McCready closed the file. "What happened to his evidence, his samples?" Sheriff's Department confiscated everything. Said it was part of the investigation. We never got it back. But he made copies. Eleanor smiled, thin, bitter. Garrett wasn't stupid. He knew they'd come for his work. That's why he used the rail car. As a backup. A place they wouldn't think to look. You know about the rail car? I helped him set it up. Brought him supplies. Coffee. Kept it secret. She met McCready's eyes. When he died, I thought about going to the EPAA myself, but I was scared. I had 2 kids. A husband. I couldn't risk it. She pulled off her glasses. Wiped her eyes. I've lived with that guilt for 40 years. McCready was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It's not too late." "What do you mean?" "The rail car's still there. The evidence is still intact. Water samples, reports, all of it." Hope flickered in Eleanor's face, then died. It's been 40 years. The statute of limitations doesn't apply to ongoing contamination. If that mine is still leaching toxins into the water, it's a current crime, not a historical one. Eleanor stared at him. "You'd do that, pursue this?" Garrett wrote a letter, asked whoever found his work to finish what he started. McCready stood. "I'm not big on ignoring last requests." "Doctor." "Catherine Strand, 3500. Eleanor made a phone call. 20 minutes later, McCready was sitting in the living room of a small house on the edge of town. Dr. Catherine Strand was 71. White hair, sharp brown eyes, hands that still moved with precision despite the arthritis twisting her knuckles. She'd been a chemist for 40 years, retired now, but her mind was still sharp as a scalpel. "Eleanor says you found Garrett's rail car," she said. "I did." "And his files?" "Most of them." She leaned back in her chair. Dutch sat at McCready's feet. The old woman looked at the dog, smiled faintly. "Garrett had a dog too, lab mix, named Murphy. That dog loved him." Her smile faded. "After Garrett died, Murphy wouldn't eat, just sat by the door waiting. Died 6 months later. Vet said it was cancer. I think it was heartbreak." Dutch's ears twitched, like he understood. Catherine folded her hands. "I worked with Garrett, helped him run the tests. We sampled the creek water every week for 3 months. August, September, October of 1983. All contaminated. Every single sample. Cadmium, lead, arsenic, mercury, all from the mine tailings." She paused. 5 children died between 1984 and 1986. Leukemia, liver cancer, kidney failure, all under the age of 10. McCready's jaw tightened. "No one investigated?" he asked. "Oh, they investigated. County brought in doctors. The doctors said it was random. Bad luck, genetic, anything but the water." Catherine's voice turned bitter. "Clearwater Industries donated $50,000 to the county hospital that year. Built a new wing, named it after Wade Jennings. Blood money." McCready pulled out the files he'd taken from the rail car, spread them on the coffee table. Catherine's hands trembled as she picked up the water sample reports. Her eyes scanned the data. 40 years fell away. She was young again, working beside Garrett, trying to save lives. "This is it," she whispered. "This is everything we documented. Is it enough to prove contamination? If the contamination is still ongoing, yes, but we'd need fresh samples. Current data. The EPA won't move on 40-year-old evidence alone. Where would we sample?" Catherine stood. Walked to a bookshelf, pulled down a rolled map, spread it on the table. It showed Ashwood Ridge and the surrounding area. The creek, the mine, the watershed. She pointed. "Here, Miller's Creek runs from the old mine site through the forest and into town. If the tailings are still leaching, this is where you'd find it." McCready studied the map, memorized the location. "I'll get samples." Catherine looked at him. "Why are you doing this? You didn't know Garrett. This isn't your fight." McCready was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've walked away from enough fights. Maybe it's time to stand in one." Dutch and the jacket, 3800. Back at the railcar, McCready gathered sample bottles Catherine had given him. Dutch ranged around the interior, nose working. McCready opened a locker in the corner. Inside hung a field jacket. Old, faded. Same style as the one he wore. He pulled it out, checked the size. Medium. Too small for him. But on the collar stitched in black thread were initials. G.B. Garrett Brennan. McCready held the jacket, felt the weight of it, the wear on the elbows, the stains on the cuffs. This wasn't just clothing. This was armor. The kind a man wore when he went to fight battles he knew he might lose. Dutch approached, sniffed the jacket. His nose lingered on the collar. The cuffs, the places where Garrett's scent would have been strongest. Then Dutch did something he rarely did. He whined, soft, low, almost inaudible. The sound of recognition, of loss. McCready knelt, brought the jacket down to Dutch's level. The dog pressed his nose into the fabric. Breathed deep, and for a moment McCready saw it. The parallel. Garrett Brennan, young, alone, fighting a system that didn't want to hear the truth, with only his dog for company, for loyalty, and McCready, 43, scarred, running from a past that didn't let go, with only Dutch beside him. Two men, 4 decades apart. Same uniform, same fight, different endings, maybe. Dutch pulled back, looked at McCready. The dog's eyes were dark, steady, and in them McCready saw something he hadn't seen in years. Purpose. Yeah, McCready said quietly. I know. He folded the jacket carefully, set it back in the locker. They had work to do. Act 2, the child. McCready spent the next 2 days gathering water samples. He hiked Miller's Creek from the mine tailings to the town limits, collected samples every quarter-mile, labeled them, stored them in coolers with ice packs. Dutch walked the routes with him, checking the banks, the flow, the places where runoff entered the stream. On the 3rd day, they were near the old mine access road when Dutch stopped. Ears up, body tense. McCready froze. What is it? Dutch's nose lifted, tested the air. Then he turned, looked back toward town, and in the distance, barely audible, a sound. Sirens. McCready pulled out his phone. No service this deep in the forest. He'd have to go back to town to find out what was happening. They jogged back to the truck, drove toward Ashwood Ridge. The sirens got louder. When they reached the main road, McCready saw vehicles. Sheriff's truck. 2 volunteer fire department SUVs. A search and rescue van. He pulled over, rolled down the window. A man in an orange vest jogged past. McCready called out, "What's happening?" The man stopped. "Kid's missing. 9 years old. Last seen near Old Mine Road." McCready's blood went cold. "How long?" 3 hours. 3 hours. In this terrain, with creeks running high from snowmelt. The man ran off, joined the search team forming near the trailhead. McCready looked at Dutch. The dog was already staring toward the forest, toward the mine, toward Miller's Creek. "You think he's out there?" McCready said. Dutch's tail was rigid, his body coiled. McCready made the decision in half a second. He grabbed Dutch's working harness from behind the seat, clipped it on. The dog transformed. Play was over. This was mission mode. They moved into the forest. The search, 4500. Dutch didn't need a scent article, didn't need direction. He knew the terrain, knew where the creek ran, knew where a scared kid might go. He pulled McCready east, away from the main search area, toward the sections of Miller's Creek that ran through the deepest part of the forest, the sections closest to the contamination zone. McCready followed. His leg ached from the old injury. The shrapnel scar on his thigh burned, but he pushed through. Dutch was moving with purpose. That meant something. They covered ground fast, Dutch in front, nose up, reading the wind. Then he stopped, sat, the alert. McCready scanned the area. They were near the creek. The water ran fast here, cold, fed by snowmelt. And there, 20 yards downstream, sitting on a rock in the middle of the creek, was a boy. He was small, maybe 9, blonde hair, blue jacket. He sat hunched over, arms wrapped around his knees, shivering. "Owen," McCready called. The boy's head lifted. His face was pale, lips tinged blue. "I can't move," the boy said. His voice was weak, slurred. "I feel dizzy." McCready waded into the creek. The water was ice cold. It soaked his boots, his pants. He didn't care. He reached the rock. The boy looked up at him. His eyes were unfocused. "I just wanted to catch frogs," Owen whispered. "Then I got dizzy. I sat down. I couldn't get back up." McCready knelt, checked the boy's pupils, dilated, checked his pulse, rapid, weak, signs of exposure. But also something else. Poisoning. The boy had been drinking the creek water. McCready scooped him up. The kid weighed maybe 70 pounds. McCready carried him back to shore. Dutch led the way, moving fast, efficient. On the bank, McCready pulled out his phone. 1 bar of service. He dialed 911. "This is Brennan McCready. I've got the missing boy. Owen Miller. He's hypothermic and showing signs of toxin exposure. We're at Miller's Creek, quarter-mile east of the old mine road. Send paramedics." The dispatcher's voice crackled. "Stay on the line. Help is coming." McCready stripped off his jacket, wrapped it around Owen. The boy shivered violently. "You're okay," McCready said. "Help's coming." Dutch sat close, pressed his warm body against Owen's side, sharing heat. The boy's hand reached out, touched Dutch's head. "Good dog," he whispered. Dutch's tail wagged once. Soft. 10 minutes later, paramedics arrived. They loaded Owen onto a stretcher, started an IV, wrapped him in thermal blankets. One of the medics looked at McCready. "How'd you find him?" McCready nodded toward Dutch. "He found him." The medic knelt, looked Dutch in the eyes. "Thank you, buddy." Dutch's ears flicked forward. Acknowledgement. They carried Owen to the ambulance. McCready and Dutch followed. At the hospital, Owen's mother rushed in. Rebecca Miller, 35, blonde, terrified. She saw her son on the gurney, conscious, alive, and she broke down. She turned to McCready. "You found him." "My dog did." She knelt in front of Dutch, put her hands on either side of his face. "Thank you. Thank you." Dutch held still, let her cry into his fur. Then the doctor appeared. "We need to run tests. He's showing symptoms consistent with heavy metal poisoning." Rebecca's face went white. "What?" "Cadmium, possibly lead. We'll know more after blood work." McCready stepped forward. He was drinking from Miller's Creek. The doctor's jaw tightened. "I'll notify the county health department." But McCready knew. The county health department had been notified 40 years ago. They'd done nothing then. They wouldn't do anything now, unless someone made them. Acts 2, the refusal, 50 to 55. That night, McCready sat by his campfire. Dutch lay beside him. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. McCready stared into the flames, thought about Owen Miller, about Garrett Brennan, about 5 kids who died 40 years ago, about a system that protected profits over people. He'd come to Montana to disappear, to hide, to let the world move on without him. But the world had followed him here, in the form of a dead man's plea, a poisoned creek, a boy who almost died. He pulled out his phone, looked at the screen. No messages, no missed calls, no one checking on him, because no one knew where he was, and no one cared. That was what he'd wanted. Isolation. Freedom from responsibility. Freedom from failing again. He stood, started packing his gear, the tent, the stove, the cooler. Dutch watched, didn't move. McCready loaded the truck bed, methodical, efficient. 30 minutes and he'd be packed. Another hour and he'd be out of Ashwood Ridge. A name and he'd be in another state. Another name. Another attempt at disappearing. He walked to the truck, opened the passenger door. "Dutch, load up." The dog didn't move. McCready turned. "I said load up." Dutch sat, perfectly still, eyes locked on the campfire, on the forest, on the direction of the rail car. "Dutch." The dog didn't even look at him. McCready walked over, knelt in front of him. "We're leaving. It's not our fight." Dutch turned his head, looked McCready in the eyes, and in that look was everything. Every mission they'd run. Every life they'd saved. Every moment Dutch had pulled McCready back from the edge. The dog's message was clear. "You don't run anymore." McCready's throat tightened. "I can't do this again. I can't fail again." Dutch's tail thumped once, soft against the dirt. "You won't." McCready sat back, stared at the fire. Minutes passed, then he stood, walked to the truck, started unloading his gear. The tent went back up. The stove went back on the camp table. The cooler stayed. When he finished, he walked back to the fire, sat down beside Dutch. "All right," he said quietly. "We stay." Dutch's tail wagged, just once. But it was enough. Somewhere in the distance, the railcar waited. The evidence waited. The truth waited. And this time, Brennan McCready wasn't going to walk away. The drought had lasted 6 weeks. Montana summers could be cruel that way. The pines stood dry as kindling. The creek beds ran shallow. The air tasted like dust and coming fire. McCready spent the next 3 days documenting everything. He photographed every page in Garrett's files, cataloged every water sample, created digital backups, and stored them on 3 separate thumb drives. One he buried in a waterproof container near his camp. One he gave to Eleanor Strand at the library. One he kept on him. Catherine Strand ran analysis on the samples he'd collected. Her home lab wasn't state certified anymore, but her methodology was sound. The results came back exactly as Garrett's had 40 years before. Cadmium, lead, arsenic, mercury, all present, all dangerous, all flowing into the town's water supply. It's gotten worse, Catherine said when she showed him the data. Her hands shook, holding the printouts. The concentrations are higher now than they were in 1983. The mine's been abandoned for 20 years, but the tailings are still leaching, still poisoning. How many people drink from that watershed? Everyone in Ashwood Ridge, 234 people, 37 children under the age of 12. McCready stared at the numbers, thought about Owen Miller, about 5 kids who'd already died, about how many more would get sick if nothing changed. We need the EPA, he said. The EPA needs a formal complaint, evidence, someone willing to go on record. Catherine met his eyes. Garrett tried. They killed him. I'm not Garrett. No, you're a stranger. You've been here 2 weeks. The town doesn't know you, doesn't trust you. She paused, and Preston Caldwell is already circling. Preston Caldwell had appeared twice more since that first meeting, once at the diner buying coffee and making pleasant conversation about property values and development opportunities, once at the gas station asking McCready how he was settling in, whether he'd given any more thought to selling. Each time the message was the same: leave, take the money, disappear. Each time McCready said no, and each time Caldwell's smile got a little thinner. On the morning of July 15th, McCready drove into town to mail copies of the evidence to the EPA regional office in Denver. Eleanor had helped him draft the complaint. Formal, detailed, impossible to ignore. He pulled up to the post office. Dutch waited in the truck windows cracked. Inside, the postmaster weighed the package, stamped it, handed McCready the receipt. Certified mail to Denver, the man said. Should arrive in 3 days. McCready paid, pocketed the receipt, walked out, and found Preston Caldwell leaning against his truck. The man wore khakis and a white button-down, sleeves rolled to the elbows, expensive watch on his wrist. He smiled when McCready approached, but his eyes were flat. Morning, Brennan? McCready stopped 5 feet away. Caldwell, I hear you've been busy, collecting water samples, talking to the old-timers. Caldwell's smile didn't waver. Making accusations. Documenting facts. Facts can be misinterpreted, data can be flawed. Caldwell stepped closer. His voice dropped. Conversational, almost friendly. You're a smart man, military background. You understand strategy. You understand when a fight is worth fighting and when it's just going to get people hurt. People are already hurt. One boy got sick. He's fine now. Growing up in a small town means exposure to things. Builds immunity. McCready's jaw tightened. That boy was poisoned by contamination that's been documented for 40 years. Documented by a man who killed himself, who was unstable, who saw conspiracies where there were none. Caldwell's voice hardened. Garrett Brennan was troubled. You dragging up his delusions doesn't change that. Dutch growled from inside the truck. Low, sustained. Caldwell glanced at the dog, then back at McCready. I'm trying to help you. Clearwater Industries employs half this county, directly or indirectly. If you shut down that operation, this town dies. Businesses close, families leave, everything collapses. Better than poisoning children. You think you're the hero here? Caldwell's smile vanished. You're not. You're an outsider, a drifter with a dumb and a savior complex. You'll file your complaint, the EPA will investigate, and they'll find nothing. Because we have lawyers, we have scientists, we have 40 years of documentation showing that mine is safe. Documentation paid for by the company. Documentation that will hold up in court. Caldwell straightened. You can't win this. All you'll do is hurt people. Good people. Who are just trying to survive. McCready met his eyes. I've heard that speech before. In Iraq, in Afghanistan. Men in suits telling soldiers that the mission was complicated. That the enemy wasn't who we thought. That sometimes you have to let bad things happen for the greater good. He stepped closer, close enough to smell Caldwell's cologne. I didn't believe it then. I don't believe it now. Caldwell's face went hard. Then you're a fool. He walked to his car, a black Audi, pristine. He paused with his hand on the door. Fires are common this time of year, he said. Not looking back. Dry season, lightning strikes, careless campers. Things burn fast up in those mountains. He got in, drove away. McCready stood there, listening to Dutch's continued growl. Warning received. The fire starts. 5800. 2 days later, the wind shifted. McCready woke to the smell. Smoke. Faint at first, then stronger. He stepped out of his tent and looked north. The horizon glowed orange, wildfire. It was still miles away, but the wind was blowing south, straight toward Ashwood Ridge, straight toward his camp. Dutch stood beside him, ears up, nose testing the air. McCready grabbed his radio, tuned to the emergency frequency. A voice crackled through. "This is Ashwood Ridge Fire Command. Wildfire confirmed north of Miller's Creek. All residents in zones A and B prepare to evacuate. Repeat, prepare to evacuate." McCready looked at his camp, at the rail car a quarter-mile away, at the evidence still stored inside. He had maybe 6 hours before the fire reached this area, maybe less if the wind picked up. He could pack, leave, get Dutch out of here, or he could try to save what Garrett had died protecting. Dutch looked up at him, waiting. McCready made his choice. "Come on." They ran to the rail car. Inside, McCready worked fast, grabbed the original files, the water samples, the photographs, stuffed everything into a waterproof duffel bag. The bag was heavy, 40 pounds of paper and glass. He slung it over his shoulder, started for the door, then stopped. Garrett's jacket still hung in the locker. McCready hesitated. It was just cloth, just fabric. It didn't matter. But it did. He grabbed the jacket, folded it carefully, added it to the bag. Outside, the smoke was thicker. The sky had gone gray. Ash fell like snow. Dutch barked, sharp, urgent. McCready turned. The fire had jumped the ridge. It was moving faster than predicted. Pushed by a wind that had turned from breeze to gale. The wall of flame was a mile away, maybe less, and between McCready and his truck there was half a mile of forest. "Run," McCready said. They ran. The fire roared behind them. Not a sound you heard, a sound you felt, in your chest, in your bones, the sound of the world ending. McCready's legs screamed, the old injury, the shrapnel. Every step was a spike of pain. But he didn't stop. Dutch ran beside him. Not ahead. Beside the bow, matching his pace, refusing to leave him behind. Ash swirled. Embers landed in the dry grass. Small fires sparked, grew. McCready's lungs burned. His vision tunneled. But he could see the truck. 200 yards. 100. 50. Behind them a tree exploded, sap boiling in the trunk. The sound like a gunshot. Dutch yelped, not in pain, in warning. McCready looked back. Another tree was falling, massive, burning, falling straight toward them. He dove left. The duffel bag flew from his shoulder, hit the ground. Samples shattered, glass breaking. The tree hit where he'd been standing. Sparks erupted. Fire spread. McCready scrambled up, grabbed the bag. The strap was burned through. He clutched it to his chest, kept running. They reached the truck. McCready threw the bag in the bed, yanked open the door. Dutch load up. The dog leaped in. McCready started the engine, threw it in reverse. The tires spun. Gravel sprayed. The fire was everywhere now, on both sides of the trail, ahead of them, behind. He shifted to drive, punched the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, crashed through burning brush. McCready couldn't see. Smoke filled the cab. He drove blind, following memory, following instinct. A deer burst across the trail. McCready swerved. The truck fishtailed, slid, hit a tree. The impact threw him forward. His head cracked against the steering wheel. Blood filled his mouth. Beside him, Dutch barked, frantic. McCready blinked, vision blurred. He tried the engine. It turned over, died, turned over again, caught. He reversed. The bumper scraped free of the tree. He shifted, drove. 2 minutes later, they broke through the smoke, into clear air, onto the paved road. Behind them, the forest burned. Caldwell's confession, 59:30. McCready was loading the duffel bag into his truck bed, checking what had survived when headlights cut through the smoke-hazed twilight. A black Audi, engine still running. Preston Caldwell stepped out. His clothes were disheveled. Ash streaked his white shirt. His hair, usually perfectly combed, stood in wild directions. The polish was gone. What remained was something raw, desperate. "You can't leave with that," Caldwell said. His voice shook, not with fear, with fury barely controlled. McCready turned. The duffel bag sat between them. "Watch me." "You don't understand." Caldwell took 3 steps forward. His hands opened and closed at his sides. "If this gets out, Ashwood Ridge dies. Not metaphorically. Actually dies. The mine is the only thing keeping this county alive. Jobs, tax revenue, road maintenance, the school, the clinic." His voice rose. 200 people lose everything. Their homes, their livelihoods, Families that have been here 5 generations will have to leave. You want that on your conscience? Better than dead kids. One boy got sick. One. In 40 years. Caldwell's face twisted. You're willing to destroy an entire town to avenge a statistic. 5 children died between 1984 and 1986. Leukemia, liver cancer, kidney failure, all under 10 years old. McCready's voice was flat, cold. That's not a statistic. That's murder. Those deaths were never definitively linked to boom because your company paid doctors to say they weren't. McCready picked up the duffel bag. Garrett documented it all, the payoffs, the falsified reports, the EPA complaints that were buried. Caldwell lunged, grabbed for the bag. You self-righteous! Dutch exploded from the truck cab, teeth bared, a snarl that came from somewhere primal. Caldwell stumbled backward, hit the ground, scrambled away. Dutch stood over him, not attacking, warning. The difference between a working dog and an attack dog. Control even in fury. Dutch, heel. The dog backed up, positioned himself between McCready and Caldwell, eyes locked on the threat. Caldwell got to his feet, brushed dirt from his pants. His hands shook. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something else. Fear. The fire's coming, McCready said quietly. You should leave. You think the EPA will care? Caldwell's laugh was bitter. Broken. We'll bury this in litigation for 20 years. Discovery. Depositions. Expert witnesses. Appeals. You'll be dead of old age before anything changes. And Ashwood Ridge will be a ghost town long before that. Maybe, but the truth will be on record. And the next person who looks will find it. And the person after that. Eventually, someone with more resources and less to lose will pick up where I left off. Caldwell stared at him. Then something in his face cracked. The mask fell away. What remained was a man who'd made choices he couldn't unmake, who'd chosen money over lives so many times he'd stopped counting. You people and your truth. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. The truth doesn't change anything. The truth is the strong survive and the weak make excuses. The truth is Garrett Brennan died 40 years ago, and it didn't matter then, and it won't matter now. You're wrong, McCready said. It mattered to Garrett. It matters to the families of those 5 kids. It matters to Owen Miller, who almost died drinking from a creek your company poisoned. Caldwell's eyes were empty. The world doesn't reward martyrs, McCready. It forgets them. He walked back to his Audi, got in. But before he drove away, he rolled down the window. When this town dies, Caldwell said, when families are evicted and businesses close and the school shuts down, I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to remember that I gave you a choice, that you could have taken the money and walked away and let sleeping dogs lie. I've let enough things lie, McCready said. Not this time. Caldwell's face hardened. Then their blood is on your hands. He drove away. The taillights disappeared into the smoke. McCready stood there for a long moment. Dutch pressed against his leg, solid, present. Let's finish this, McCready said. They got in the truck, drove toward the evacuation center. Behind them, the fire consumed the forest. And somewhere in that inferno, the railcar that had held Garrett Brennan's evidence for 40 years finally surrendered to the flames. But the truth it contained was already safe, already on its way to people who couldn't be bought, already impossible to bury again. The girl in the tree. The evacuation center was chaos. The high school gymnasium packed with families. Red Cross volunteers handing out water and blankets. Children crying. Adults trying to process losing everything they owned. McCready parked, got out, pulled the duffel bag from the truck bed, checked the contents one more time. Half the samples were broken. Glass and water soaked into cardboard. But the files were intact, sealed in plastic. The photographs survived. Garrett's jacket folded at the bottom was untouched. Enough. It was enough. He carried the bag inside. Found Eleanor Strand near the registration table helping organize shelter assignments. She saw him, saw the bag. Her eyes widened. You got it out. Most of it. She took the bag like it was sacred, held it against her chest. I'll keep it safe. I have a fireproof safe at home. Everything will be locked up by morning. McCready nodded, turned to leave. But Dutch wasn't beside him. His chest tightened. He scanned the gymnasium. The dog wasn't there. Dutch, no response. He pushed through the crowd, out the doors, into the parking lot. Dutch wasn't there either. Then he heard it. Barking, distant, coming from the direction of the fire break. The direction of the flames. No. McCready ran. He followed the sound, back up the access road, toward the smoke, toward the glowing horizon where the fire consumed everything. And there at the edge of the fire break, where crews had cut a defensive line, he found Dutch. The dog stood at the base of a massive oak, barking up into the branches. Not the alert bark, not the warning bark, the emergency bark, the one that meant civilian in danger. In the tree 20 feet up was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 7. Blonde hair in braids, pink jacket. She clung to a branch with both arms, frozen, too terrified to climb down, too small to jump. McCready looked around. No parents, no one else. Just the girl in the tree and the fire creeping closer. She must have gotten separated during the evacuation. Panicked, run the wrong direction, climbed when the smoke got thick. Now she was trapped. "Hey," McCready called it up. "Can you hear me?" The girl's tear-streaked face looked down. She nodded. Couldn't speak. "I'm coming up. Stay right there." He grabbed the lowest branch, pulled himself up. His leg protested. The shrapnel scar burned. He ignored it. Climbed. The bark was hot. Not burning yet, but the fire was close. Maybe 200 yards. The wind pushed it closer every minute. He reached her level, moved along the branch. It swayed under his weight. "I've got you," he said, kept his voice calm, steady. "What's your name, Emma?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Emma, I'm Brennan. I need you to let go of the branch and wrap your arms around my neck. Can you do that?" She shook her head, terrified. "I know you're scared, but the fire's coming. We need to move now." Below, Dutch barked again. Urgent. Emma looked down at the dog. Something in her face shifted. "Is that your dog?" "Yeah, his name's Dutch. He found me. He's good at that. Will he wait for us?" McCready looked down. Dutch stood at the base, unwavering, eyes locked on them. "He'll wait." Emma took a breath, let go of the branch, wrapped her small arms around McCready's neck. He held her with one arm, started climbing down with the other. The tree groaned. The fire was close enough now that he could hear it. The roar, the crackle, the sound of wood splitting under extreme heat. He was 10 feet from the ground when the branch above them cracked. Not the one he was on, the one above. A massive limb weakened by heat breaking free. It fell, burning, huge, falling straight down. McCready saw it, knew he couldn't jump clear. Not with Emma, not from this height. He braced, wrapped both arms around the girl, pressed her face into his shoulder so she wouldn't see, waited for impact. It didn't come. He looked down. Dutch had positioned himself directly below the falling branch, not running, not dodging, standing firm, braced. The branch hit the dog with the full force of burning wood and gravity, 200 pounds of oak and flame. Dutch yelped, once, sharp, a sound McCready had never heard him make, then went silent. The branch rolled off, settled on the ground, still burning. Dutch lay on his side, not moving. "No." The word ripped out of McCready. "No, no, no." He dropped the last 8 feet, landed hard, set Emma down. "Run to the fire break. Go." She ran. McCready turned to Dutch. The dog lay motionless. The branch had struck his hindquarters. Blood spread across the ground. Dark. Too much. McCready dropped to his knees, put his hands on Dutch's chest, felt for a heartbeat. There. Faint. Irregular. But there. "You don't get to die," McCready said. His voice broke completely. "Not for me. Not again." Dutch's eyes opened, just slits, barely conscious, pupils blown, shock setting in. His tail moved, once. Weak, a final gesture. "Worth it." "You stubborn..." McCready couldn't finish. Tears cut tracks through the ash on his face. "Why didn't you run? Why didn't you save yourself?" "Because that wasn't the bomb. The job was save the human, always had been, always would be." McCready scooped him up, all 70 pounds of muscle and loyalty and heart. Dutch whimpered, pain cutting through 12 years of discipline, through every instinct that said, "Don't show weakness." I know it hurts. Stay with me." He ran. The fire was on them now, heat at his back, smoke choking. He ran anyway. Dutch in his arms, blood soaking through his shirt, the dogs breathing shallow, labored. Behind them the oak tree erupted. The flames consumed it. The branch that had almost killed them both turned to ash. Ahead, voices, firefighters. The evacuation team. Someone saw him, shouted, ran toward them. "I need a vet," McCready gasped. "Now, he's bleeding out." A woman in fire gear grabbed her radio. Medical to the firebreak, injured working dog, severe trauma. McCready laid Dutch on the ground, gentle as he could. The dog's eyes stayed on his face, trusting even now. Help's coming, McCready whispered. You did good. You saved that little girl. You saved me. Dutch's tail twitched. Barely, I know. A pickup truck screeched to a stop. Dr. Ruth Abernathy jumped out. Her veterinary clinic was evacuated, but she'd stayed with the fire crews, ready for situations like this. She took one look at Dutch. Her face went professional, controlled. Get him in the truck. Now. McCready lifted him again. Laid him in the truck bed on blankets Ruth had already spread out. Ruth climbed in beside the dog, started examining the injury. Crushed muscle tissue, possible fracture, internal bleeding likely. Can you save him? She didn't answer, just worked. The truck drove, away from the fire, toward the clinic 10 miles south. McCready sat in the cab, hands shaking, covered in ash and blood and tears. And for the first time since Kandahar, he prayed. Not eloquent, not formal, just desperate. Please, not him. Take anything else. But not him. The truck drove through the night, and behind them the forest burned. Act 3, the vigil. 6500 to 7000, Dr. Abernathy's clinic appeared through the smoke haze. A small building with green siding and a hand-painted sign. She'd called ahead. The lights were on. The door open. 2 veterinary technicians met them. They transferred Dutch to a gurney, wheeled him inside. Fast, efficient. Ruth looked at McCready. McCready, you need to wait here. I'm not leaving him. You are, because I need space to work and you'll be in the way. Her voice softened. I'll do everything I can, but you need to let me try. McCready wanted to argue, wanted to follow them into surgery, wanted to be there, but he nodded, stepped back. The doors closed. He stood in the waiting room. Walls covered in posters about tick prevention and heartworm medication. A water cooler in the corner. Plastic chairs that had seen better decades. He collapsed into one, put his head in his hands. The minutes crawled. 10, 20, 30. He couldn't sit still. Stood. Paced. The floor was linoleum. His boots left ash prints. An hour passed. The door opened. A technician emerged. Young, maybe 25. She saw McCready. You're with the Belgian Malinois? Yeah. Dr. Abernathy said to tell you she's started surgery. It'll be at least 2 more hours. Is he alive? Yes, but it's serious. The impact crushed muscle tissue in his left hindquarter, fractured his femur. We're trying to stabilize the bone and repair the vessels before he loses too much blood. McCready's throat closed. Survival rate? She hesitated. Doctor, Abernathy is very good. That wasn't an answer. The technician went back inside. McCready sat again. Time became meaningless. He didn't check his phone, didn't look at the clock, just existed in the space between before and after. Before Dutch was injured, after Dutch was gone. If he was gone. Another hour. The waiting room door opened. Rebecca Miller walked in. Owen's mother. She carried a thermos in a paper bag. Someone at the evacuation center said you were here, she said quietly, that your dog was hurt. McCready nodded, couldn't speak. She sat beside him, poured coffee from the thermos into a cup, handed it to him. Drink. He did. It was hot, black, strong. Owen wanted to come, she said, but I thought you might need quiet. Thank you. Dutch saved my son's life. If there's anything we can do, just wait with me. So she did. They sat in silence. Rebecca occasionally refilling his coffee. The clock on the wall ticked. The fluorescent lights hummed. At the 2-hour mark, the surgery doors opened. Dr. Abernathy emerged. Her scrubs were stained, her face exhausted, but her eyes weren't empty. McCready stood. Is he alive? Stable. The surgery went as well as it could. The relief hit him like a physical force. His knees nearly buckled. Rebecca caught his arm. Can I see him? McCready asked. 5 minutes. He's still sedated. Ruth led him to the recovery room. Dutch lay on a thick, padded mat, bandages wrapped around his hindquarters, an IV in his foreleg, a cone around his neck to prevent chewing. Eyes closed, breathing steady. McCready knelt, ran his hand along Dutch's side, felt his heartbeat. Strong, alive. The femur fracture was worse than expected, Ruth said. I had to place a pin. He'll need it permanently. And the muscle damage? She paused. He'll recover, but he won't be the same. What does that mean? He'll walk, probably run eventually, but he'll have a limp, permanent, and in cold weather or when he's tired, it'll be pronounced. He'll never be deployable again. Not as a working dog. McCready looked at the dog, the warrior who'd saved his life twice, who'd stood under a falling tree to protect a stranger, who'd given everything. He doesn't have to work, McCready said quietly. He's earned rest. Ruth's expression softened. He'll need to stay here at least a week, then recovery at home for 3 to 4 months. Physical therapy, restricted movement, pain management. I'll do whatever it takes. I know you will. She touched his shoulder. He's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him. Ruth left him alone with Dutch. McCready sat on the floor beside the mat, put his hand on the dog's chest, felt each breath, each heartbeat. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry I brought you here. I'm sorry I put you in danger. I'm sorry you had to. Dutch's tail moved, just a twitch, but deliberate. Stop apologizing. McCready smiled through tears. Yeah, okay. He stayed there for a long time, just being present, just being grateful. Outside, the fire still raged. The world still turned. The fight wasn't over. But in this small room with this stubborn dog, there was peace. And for the first time in 12 years, McCready understood something. He'd spent so long running from Kandahar, from the guilt, from the failure, from the men he couldn't save. But Dutch had never run. Dutch had stayed. Through the explosions, through the blood, through McCready's nightmares, and his silence, and his drinking, and his retreat from the world. Dutch had stayed, and now finally McCready was going to do the same. Not run, not hide, not disappear. Stay, fight, finish what Garrett started, because that's what loyalty looked like. That's what sacrifice meant. And Dutch had just taught him the lesson one more time. At a cost McCready would spend the rest of his life trying to repay. Act 3C. Resolution. 70,000 to 77,000. The fire burned for 3 days, consumed 12,000 acres, destroyed 4 homes, damaged the old mine infrastructure, burned the rail car down to twisted metal and ash, but it didn't reach Ashwood Ridge. The fire breaks held. The wind shifted on the second day, and on the morning of July 18th, rain came. Not much, just enough. By July 20th, residents were allowed back. McCready's camp was gone. The tent, the gear, everything reduced to scorched earth. But the truck had survived. He'd parked it at the evacuation center before going back for the evidence. Eleanor Strand had kept her promise. The files were safe, locked in her fireproof safe. Every document, every photograph, Garrett's jacket. On July 23rd, 2 EPA investigators arrived. A man and a woman, both in their 40s. Professional, thorough. They tested the water, collected samples, interviewed residents. McCready met with them for 4 hours, showed them everything. The files, the photographs, Catherine Strand's analysis, Owen Miller's medical records. The investigators asked questions, took notes, gave nothing away. But McCready saw it in their eyes. This was real. This was big. This wasn't going away. On August 1st, the EPA issued a preliminary finding. Contamination confirmed. Heavy metals in the watershed at dangerous levels. Source identified as mine tailings from the abandoned Clearwater copper mine. Immediate remediation required. Clearwater Industries was fined. $2.3 million. Required to fund a complete cleanup. Install filtration systems for the town's water supply. Monitor water quality for the next 20 years. And submit to quarterly inspections. No exceptions. The news hit the county like an earthquake. Preston Caldwell resigned 2 days later. Quietly. A brief statement released through the company's lawyer. Personal reasons. Effective immediately. He left Montana. No forwarding address. No press conference. Just gone. Sheriff Tucker Jennings tried to minimize it. Held a press conference saying the contamination was exaggerated. That the EPA was overreacting. That the town's water had always been safe. Then Owen Miller's mother stood up in the county board meeting, held up her son's medical records, read the diagnosis out loud. Cadmium poisoning, lead exposure, from drinking water contaminated by the Clearwater mine. Then 3 other mothers stood, with their own children's records. Same story. The board forced Jennings to resign that night. Justice wasn't Hollywood. There were no arrests, no trials, no dramatic confessions, just quiet accountability. The system adjusting to pressure it couldn't ignore anymore. It was enough. 6 months later, 73 to January came cold and clear. Snow blanketed the mountains 8 inches deep. The air smelled clean, sharp. The way winter should smell. The creeks ran clear now, filtered. monitored every week by EPA contractors. The heavy metals were being extracted from the soil. Slowly, it would take years, but the water was safe to drink. The town had changed in small ways, visible if you knew where to look. The Red Pine Diner had a new water filtration system. Maggie Dalton had insisted on it even though the town supply was clean now. Clear tubes ran along the back wall, filters visible so customers could see their water was safe. She called it the Garrett Brennan Memorial Water System. Had a small brass plaque made. Rebecca Miller brought Owen in every Saturday morning. The boy had recovered fully. No lasting effects from the cadmium exposure. He'd started calling Dutch the hero dog. Would ask about him every time he saw McCready. When's Dutch coming home? Soon. Dr. Catherine Strand had come out of retirement, not to practice chemistry but to teach. She ran water quality workshops at the library every Tuesday evening, taught residents how to test their own wells, how to read EPA reports, how to ask the right questions. 30 people showed up the first week, 50 the second. Eleanor Strand had started a scholarship fund, the Garrett Brennan Memorial Scholarship, for students pursuing environmental science or public health. The first recipient was a girl from Ashwood Ridge High School, headed to University of Montana in the fall. Full ride. Sheriff Tucker Jennings was gone. Moved to Idaho, Boise, someone said. No one in Ashwood Ridge cared enough to confirm. The new sheriff was a woman from Billings, Dana Morrison, 38, former state trooper. She'd called McCready to her office in late November, thanked him personally, said if he ever needed anything the department owed him. He'd nodded, said nothing, left. The Clearwater mine was in federal receivership. The company had filed for bankruptcy protection in September. The cleanup was being managed by a federal contractor now. Slow work. Expensive work, but honest. McCready had built a cabin on his land. One room, 12 by 16 feet, wood stove in the corner, solar panels on the roof, a porch that faced east so he could watch the sunrise. He'd done most of the work himself, cutting logs, notching joints. Eleanor's grandson had helped with the roof. A Vietnam vet from the next valley over had helped with the wiring. It wasn't much, but it was home. And for the first time in 12 years, McCready didn't feel like he was hiding. He felt like he was living. Dutch had come home in late November. 4 months of recovery. The surgery had been successful, but the damage was permanent. The dog walked with a pronounced limp, his left rear leg dragging slightly. In the morning, especially when it was cold, he moved stiffly. Needed time to warm up. But he moved. Dr. Abernathy had said most dogs wouldn't have survived an injury like that. The branch had crushed muscle, fractured bone, damaged nerves in ways that should have left him paralyzed. But Dutch wasn't most dogs. He'd worked through the pain with the same discipline he'd shown in combat. Physical therapy every day. Walking, swimming in the creek once it warmed enough. Building strength. By November, he could run again. Not full speed, not for long, but he could run. And every time McCready saw that limp, he remembered the moment Dutch had stood under a falling tree, had taken the impact meant for McCready and a 7-year-old girl named Emma, had chosen without hesitation to sacrifice himself. The dog had saved him twice. Kandahar, Montana. McCready intended to spend the rest of his life making sure Dutch never regretted either choice. On January 5th, they hiked to where the railcar had stood. The snow was deep. Dutch struggled through it. The cold made his injury ache. But he didn't stop. They reached the site. Nothing remained but scorched earth and scattered metal. The fire had been so hot, it had melted the steel frame, reduced 40 years of evidence to ash. But the evidence had served its purpose. It was in federal hands now, in EPA databases, in court filings, in newspaper articles. The truth was out. Finally, after 4 decades of silence, McCready set down the pack he'd carried, pulled out a stone, granite, flat, 2 feet long, a foot wide. He'd spent 2 weeks carving it, by hand, in the evenings after building the cabin. His fingers blistered, the work slow, but he'd finished it. The inscription read, Garrett Brennan, 1960 to 1983. He tried to speak, we finally listened. He set the stone at the site, stepped back, snow fell softly around them. Dutch sat beside him, both of them looking at the memorial. You were 23, McCready said quietly. Same age as the men I lost in Kandahar. They were trying to do the right thing too, trying to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. His breath fogged in the cold air. I couldn't save them, couldn't finish their mission. I carried that for 12 years. Thought the best thing I could do was disappear. Stop failing, stop hurting people. He looked at Dutch. The dog looked back, patient, was steady. But you wouldn't let me. You stopped at that rail car, refused to leave, made me stay when every instinct told me to run. Dutch's tail wagged, slow, deliberate. So we stayed, and we finished what Garrett started, and we saved some kids. McCready's voice roughened. And maybe that doesn't erase Kandahar. Maybe it doesn't bring back the men I lost. But maybe it means their deaths weren't the end of the story. Maybe it means sacrifice isn't wasted if someone's willing to honor it. He reached into the pack again, pulled out Garrett's field jacket, the one he'd saved from the rail car, the one that had survived the fire in the waterproof duffel. He'd cleaned it, repaired the tears where age had frayed the fabric, washed away 40 years of dust and smoke and grief. Now it looked almost new. He draped it over the stone, let it rest there like a flag over a grave. You stood up when it would have been easier to stay quiet, McCready said. You fought when they told you to stop. You left evidence when you knew they'd killed you for it. You trusted that someone would care enough to finish what you started. He straightened. I hope I did it right. I hope wherever you are, you know your death wasn't for nothing. The wind moved through the pines. Snow drifted down. The jacket settled over the stone. McCready turned, started walking back toward the cabin. Dutch limped beside him, slower than he used to move, but present, loyal. Halfway back, McCready stopped, looked at the dog. Thank you, he said, for not giving up on me, for making me stay, for showing me what loyalty looks like even when it costs everything. Dutch's tail wagged. His dark eyes held McCready's. That's what we do. We stay. We fight. We don't leave our people behind. Never have. Never will. They walked home together through the snow. Behind them, the memorial stood watch, a marker for a man who died trying to save strangers. Ahead of them, smoke rose from the cabin's chimney, a life waiting, a purpose found. And in the space between past and future, McCready finally understood. Redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about honoring it by doing better in the present. One day, one choice. One act of staying when leaving would be easier. That's all it took. That's all it had ever taken. Epilogue. Faith message. 7,500 to 7,700. Sometimes miracles don't come like lightning splitting the sky. Sometimes they come quiet, gentle, easy to miss if you're not paying attention. Like a mom that refuses to get in the truck, that sits down and won't move, that looks at you with eyes that say, this matters, stay. Like a letter written 40 years ago by a man who knew he was going to die, who left evidence anyway, who trusted that someday someone would care, like a stranger who came to disappear and ended up standing his ground, who walked into fire to save what a dead man had tried to protect, who chose to stay when leaving would have been easier. Brennan McCready came to Montana to run from his past, to hide from failure, to vanish into the wilderness where no one would ask him to be brave again. But Dutch taught him something. Being brave isn't about never being afraid. It's about being afraid and staying anyway. Garrett Brennan tried to speak the truth, and they silenced him. For 40 years that silence held. But silence only lasts until someone decides to break it. Maybe that's how God works most of the time. Not by changing the whole world in an instant, but by putting loyal companions beside us. By preserving evidence we think is lost. By giving us the choice to stay when running would be safer. And then waiting to see if we're brave enough to listen. In our everyday lives, we face those moments too. When walking away is easier than standing firm. When silence is safer than truth. When fear is louder than conscience. The question isn't whether we'll be afraid. The question is what we'll do with that fear. Will we run or will we stay? McCready stayed, and Dutch stayed, and together they finished what Garrett started. The creeks run clean now. The children are safe. And somewhere in the Montana wilderness, a stone marks the place where a man died trying to do the right thing. His voice was silenced for 40 years, but it's speaking now. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment. Tell me which moment stayed with you. Which choice made you think? Which line reminded you why truth matters? Subscribe to keep going, to keep hearing stories about loyalty, about faith, about redemption, about ordinary people who do extraordinary things when they choose to stay instead of run. And may God bless you and keep you. May He guide your steps when the path is dark and the choice is hard. May He give you the courage to stay when everything in you wants to run. May He place loyal companions beside you when you need them most. And may He grant you the wisdom to listen when they refuse to let you leave the truth behind. Because sometimes the greatest miracle isn't the dramatic rescue. It's the quiet refusal to give up. The steady presence that says, I'm here, I'm staying, and I'm not letting you face this alone. That's what Dutch gave McCready. That's what Garrett gave the world. That's what we're called to give each other. Loyalty, truth, the courage to stay, even when it costs us everything, especially then.